In the current situation in every tier list, Gunlance ranks
Boring! You don't want to hear about that, Vault Hunter! You want to hear about loot and packs and explosions! I'm Torg, and I'm here to ask you one question, and one question only. Explosions?
Gunlance in Rise is the most fun incarnation of the weapon since forever. This due how Capcom has worked to make it the fastest and more movable it even has been. You can literally fly through the skies and land upon your enemies to bring death and explosions to them. This guide compiles and expands upon all my previous existing videos about Rise. I talk about absolutely everything about the weapon, and it is intended for players of every level. First chapters are ideal for those who know nothing about the weapon, where I introduce all the moveset and the tools you can use plus some early tips. Also for newcomers I recommend armor and weapons for clearing the low rank and reaching the endgame, where then I got into painful detail explaining all the playing styles of the weapon, how skill works, and give examples of the builds to use and the weapons to craft. Gunlance is a contradictory weapon with both a low and high skill cap. Is a weapon very easy to pick up and start killing stuff with little effort, but also has a lot of advanced techniques that are hard to master. The duality of Gunlance comes from the duality of its attacks. Gunlance has two attacks types, melee and shelling. Shelling is the easiest attack of the game. Basically it is a cheat. You don't have to learn about hit zones, your attacks never get reflected, and you can virtually ignore your weapon sharpness. It is decently guarantees damage, easy to use. The major problem of shelling is because is fixed damage. You can only raise it by a few methods. What can be raised to deal more damage than shelling are the melee attacks. Gunlance's melee attacks are precise quick lance thrusts or brutish slow slaps. The thrusts are weaker than of a regular lance, but the swinging one are a powerful source of damage. The main advantage then Gunlance puts in the table is versatility and capacity for adaptation. It expects you to use your shells on monsters with hard skins, or hard to access weak points, and your powerful melee attacks on good hit zones. It allows you specialize your builds in shelling, melee, or go 50% basically. It is 3 weapons in one. A Gunlance main never finds the need to learn other weapons, and mastering the different combos and way to play makes it an ever-fresh weapon. To complement the attacking capacities, Gunlance also offers the best grade of shield in the game with 3+ different kinds of auto-shielding moves. Monster Hunter Rise in general has boosted the movement of all weapons thanks to the wire bugs, and Gunlance greatly benefits from it. It also features quick steps that can be used to get through attacks, or position yourself with quick steps that are more a movement tool than a way to evade attacks. In multiplayer, Gunlance's role is a flanker and a suppressor. High shelling damage allows to break monster parts and trip monsters very easily, making the whole team benefit from those knockouts. One of the main disadvantages of most weapons in MP is that when the monster doesn't have your attention, the head and other typical weak points get out of reach, and they either waste time repositioning, or attack dealing mediocre damage. Gunlance's shelling, since it always does nice damage, allows you to attack anywhere as long you have the monster at reach. Namely, your poking moveset. Just pressing the A button makes you throw a stab. You can repeat this up to 3 times and all 3 do the same damage. After the third one, you will pause a little. The problem of these pokes is that by themselves they are weak, very weak, and it is a better use of your time using the other moves. Or combine them. Normal shells are done with the A button. I usually call it a shell button in my guides. Just like the pokes, they are very weak themselves. They can do either more or less damage than a poke depending where you hit the monster. Shelling consumes 1 shell in the upper left corner. You may recover all your shells doing a quick reload by holding guard plus shell, or plus A, after any attack, shell included. Now, something much better than just using pokes or shells themselves is doing a poke with X and immediately shell with A. This is what is normally called a poke shell. The shell comes out faster than what would take another poke to come out. The time between shell and poke, A then X, is the normal one without any kind of combo capacity. It was different in Monster Hunter World. This is still pretty weak for the demo and early game, but take this into mind for later when you unlock Wide, which features very strong shells. The other poke move is done while holding the guarding button. Hold R and tap X repeatedly. This move is slower and even weaker than the regular pokes, but present 2 good features. The first and main feature is that it puts you back into guard very quickly. Unless you are dumb and spam it, you can be totally safe just using this move. Of course you are also murdering your DPS doing only this. A good nickname of this move is the chicken stab. Use it if you are a coward and you are afraid of getting hit. The second more important is that it is a diagonal poke that makes it easier to hit weak points like heads. And like regular stabs you can combo it into shells and other attacks I haven't talked about yet. Charged shells, Wyrmstake and upswing. Charged shells are an essential Gunlance move in Monster Hunter Rise. A charged shell is done by holding A and releasing it after an instant. You can visualize when it is ready when your weapon is glowing red. Holding the button any further gives no advantage with the starting normal shell type. With good timing you can release it a bit before glows red but is tricky. Use the visual confirmation at first and then try to make your timing shorter and shorter. A charged shell does roughly a 50% extra damage. You can cancel charged shells evading, press B, while you still hold A. You also may tilt up and down in the left stick to change the angle of the shot. Traditionally normal shell type is considered awful with charged shells but here seems stronger plus they have a special quality, fast Wyrmstake. Wyrmstake is one of the 3 Gunlance power moves. I'm talking about it before the others because mastering this move is the key to Gunlance in Monster Hunter Rise, is an edge on damage you can dismiss. Unlike shells, it uses its own ammo type that is only reloaded by doing a full reload. A full reload is done with the same motion as the quick one, R plus A, but when you are in a passive position or while you are guarding. As its name implies it is slower than a quick one and its only use is to reload your stake. Wyrmstake can be done from a myriad of commands and depending on how can be faster or slower. In all cases the damage is the same. Hold A, release A, back in the left stick and A, the quickest way to pull out the attack. It is also the fast version. You can do it from any angle, the angled versions are even a bit faster. A, after shelling twice in a row, a try to shell again will result in a Wyrmstake instead. This one is pretty bad compared with the previous one. Is way slower and the only benefit is a 50% extra damage that is pitiful. You seriously are better off doing a charged shell after the first one for the quicker version. X plus A. The first motion is called upswing and puts your cannon aiming upwards. Doing the same motion again will produce a Wyrmstake. This is good for 2 things, hitting flying monsters or hitting tall monsters' heads. Once again, taking your time to do a charged shell is beneficial. X plus A, upswing, slam, and then you can go directly into a slow Wyrmstake. This combo is done when you have a short opening on a monster down and you don't have enough ammo to full burst. X plus A, upswing, slam, full burst and Wyrmstake. I will talk about the full burst attack shortly. Basically for the moment, it unloads all your remaining shells. If you press A again, you will toss a Wyrmstake for a lot of extra damage. You will use this a lot every time you use a full burst whenever possible. X plus A, upswing, slam, full burst, sweep and Wyrmstake, basically is the same as before but adding an extra attack. The sweep is the second stronger melee attack after the Wyrmstake. Basically you use this when you are sure you can land both the stake and the sweep. If you aren't sure, go for the stake because it gives the biggest payback. With the weapon sheathed, ZL plus X, R plus X, R plus A, wire bug, air shell, air full burst, Wyrmstake. This is a complicated motion and the first air combo we talk about. I will cover the air combos later. For now, remember that when you land after using a full burst, you will be able to follow up with a stake. This is the quickest access to the stake from the air. And finally, with the weapon drawn, ZL plus A, get hit, A, ZL plus A is called guard edge, is a silk bind attack that requires 1 bug. If you get hit while performing it, you will guard the attack, gain some sharpness back and get the choice to either do a slam with X or a quick Wyrmstake with A. Best thing is that after activating it you can aim your stake into any direction. If you aren't sure if you are going to land it, use instead the slam move. In resume about the Wyrmstake is that you have access to it from virtually any point of your combos and you should learn when to go for it, that is always. When you start playing, use the faster options first and then when you get a battle sense, go expanding the combo with the criteria of how long the opening is. A great thing about the Wyrmstake is that after the first hit, you will deal the full damage. This is great because you can choose to willingly get hit after using it and still get all the damage in. Now, let's talk about slam and full bursting. The slam is a move that is done from multiple situations. How its name indicates consists in slamming your gunlance into the ground, is like twice as powerful as a poke. After any slam, you can follow up with a full burst pressing A. A full burst unload whatever remaining shell you had in your gunlance. Each shell has a hitbox and you are not guaranteed to hit them all, so the better the closer you are to the monster. The only situation you shouldn't full burst after a slam is if you don't know you can recover from the huge recoil of the burst before getting hit. After doing a full burst you can't do a full reload directly. Your only options are either going for the full reload killing your momentum or going into a sweep. I already mentioned it as one of the strongest Gunlance melee attacks. You can do a sweep either after full bursting or after a slam or after landing with an air full burst. Other than damage, the advantage is that you can perform a quick reload after it. This is important because that creates an infinite combo. Upswing, slam, full burst, sweep, quick reload, slam, full burst, sweep, quick reload and repeat. Normally in an opening you only get the chance to do this motion 1 or 2 times. When the monster is about to recover control, consider breaking the combo with a Wyrmstake to maximize your damage. The common ways to perform a slam are X plus A, X, upswing, slam. This is the most common way to start the combo with your weapon drawn. Forward plus X, X plus A, forward lunge, slam. The forward lunge is another essential Gunlance move, moves you shortly a couple of steps and does an upswing. It actually does the same damage and all. This is also nice in that you can lunge with the weapon sheathed or turn around and attack with it. A very versatile move. On the air, R plus X plus A, X, the air slam, has the properties of a normal slam and is the fastest access to a slam when you have your weapon sheathed. This is awesome to both move and attack at the same time. You usually get enough time to Wyrmstake after this. A, R plus A, X plus A, shell, quick reload, slam. The major use of this combo is that none of your attacks will bounce off the enemy. If you need to move a bit forward or have your weapon sheathed, you can do forward plus X and quickly A to cancel the running lunge into a shell. The shell also can be charged instead, but I would always go for a stake after a charged shell. Finally, activating guard edge and successfully countering an attack allows you to slam X into full burst, A into any direction. Guard edge is both attack and defense and the backbone of Gunlance in the early game. Its main advantage is that you can cancel most moves recoveries using it, allowing to guard against attacks you would get hit instead. The activation is not immediate and can't be really used as a last moment reaction, or you will still get hit and lose one of your bugs without benefit. Guard edge also gets pushback protection unlike the regular guard and can be used to guard against stronger attacks. As said before, holding your guard button is a bad thing because not only are you limited to your weakest move but also turns a sitting duck, and strong attacks will still do some chip damage. Successive strong attacks will deplete all your stamina and kill you. Guard edge can save you from that and put you back into attack, allowing to slam or Wyrmstake immediately. Because this, the number one advice I can give you is, always keep one or both bugs at hand to be used with guard edge. I have not talked about Hail Cutter yet. The skill bind done with ZL plus X, and this is because it is a move that offers no real benefit. I have enough motives to make a whole video telling why it is a bad move, but to make things shorter, the principal reason is that it costs 2 whole bugs, so since you will be using your bugs for guard edge, there will be few situations where you will be able to perform it. Using Hail Cutter disables one of the bugs for 10 seconds and the other another 10's, only starting to recharge after the first one. Guard edge on the other hand only consumes 1 bug for 15 seconds, using both will have both bugs recharging at once at the same pace. The main situation where using bugs other than for guard edge is for using ZL plus X with your weapon sheath to jump into the air and initiate an aerial attack. The 2 really useful aerial combos are R plus A plus B, X, A for an air slam into full burst, or R plus A plus X, R plus A then either X or A to do an air burst into either a sweep or a Wyrmstake upon landing. The air shell, R plus A plus X, totally stops your momentum in the air, and because of that, you should only initiate it when about to hit the ground. If you use an airburst just when about to hit the ground, you will negate the recoil and land faster. This is a complicated combo, so feel good just doing air slams when you start playing. Gunlance starting mobility on the ground is frankly terrible. Basically, you never should try to chase the monster with your weapon out. There exists this technique called charged backsteps that works great for mid-distances but is the kind of advanced technique with a complicated input. I got a video about how to use it in the description. Can still be useful for not too long distances. Much easier is to just sheath your weapon and yeet yourself towards the monster using a wire bug. As noted before, not only is a very quick movement but also a super fast way to initiate an air slam and full burst. The recovery of a wire bug used this way is just 7 seconds and will not compromise your defense too much. It is better used if you go past the monster and land on its back because it will take him longer to target you and begin his attacks. Now, finally the last move you sure are missing, the Wyvern Fire done by R+A+X on the ground on neutral or after virtually any attack. Wyvern Fire is great, but has one big problem: its recovery time is 3 full minutes. This is good for tripping a monster again just when it stands up after being tripped once. Other great use is to initiate a mount since the mounting animation will cancel the recovery. A third advance use is exploiting that you can initiate it after one attack to cancel the recovery and use it as a guard point. If the attack is strong, you will be pushed back and the Wyvern Fire will not be consumed, ready to use in another situation. If you don't get pushed back, you will hit the enemy for 210 damage, no bad. Hail Cutter can be used to discount 45 seconds of cooldown, but once again, is not worth expending all your bugs for this. Only exception I would consider would be using a Hail Cutter just after a Wyvern Fire to cancel the huge pushback. The basic rules of Blast Dash are the following. Each use costs 1 shell. To initiate it in the ground, hold A, then release the button with the timing of a charged shell. Holding A or using ZR+A mid-air will chain another Blast Dash. You only can do 2 air blast dashes before touching the ground. Air blast dashes can be performed in any direction. If you touch the ground, the blast dash ends and you can't chain another one. While in the air, your only attacks are a shell with A or slam with X. When you land, you can do X to use a slow slam. Working with and against these rules is what this video is about. Let's start learning how to optimize your movement using Blast Dash, since I will assume that if you are using Blast Dash you aren't using a palamute. If you are with your weapon sheath, the very best way to initiate Blast Dash is by first propelling yourself into the high sky using your wire bugs. You only will be able to use 2 Blast Dashes, but if you are using an evade extender, the amount of field you cover with just the wire bug is awesome, and the extra highness allows you to extend your flying time. Here is the example. If you are at a high enough position, you can go further forward in the air after the second air blast dash by using an air shell and then ZRXB. This has 2 additional advantages. First is that sheath your weapon so upon landing you can once again toss yourself into the air without stop. If you have a normal gunlance, you get an additional full fly. The second is that if you do it into a wall, it allows you to climb. You can go through maps ignoring barriers, flying away. The major problem of Blast Dash is when you are close to the ground, especially traversing uphill terrain like the Hidden Shrine one. The trick for those is using the Hold A input for the air dashes. This will allow it to glide close to the ground without landing and chain the next Blast Dash. Sadly, this will force you into the hard landing after the 3rd Blast Dash. Landing and continuing to Blast Dash is another art. The best landings are unsheathed and while high X for an instant grounding slam. The instant slam allows you quicking forward hop into more blast dashes or quick reload and blast dash if you are out of ammo. Can you do the same when you are almost touching the ground? Not with that altitude. When you are low, you have to get stuck into the landing animation or the slow slam. There is no workaround for this. Landing is better if you have enough ammo to keep dashing. Do a forward hop and charge. If you don't have ammo, do the slam and then quick reload and blast away. Since Gunlance has that terrible slow sheath animation, you don't get much benefit of sheathing and using wire bugs again. It is a lot of times better to slam when you aren't close to the ground to get the quick version and keep moving, but this is not always possible. The ZR+A version of the air blast has the good advantage of having you control when it happens exactly. It is better used when you have to deal with corners or want to keep a certain altitude. With all these hints combined with the great wire bugs and the additional camps, you will not miss a palamute at all. A lot of the principles of the movement applies here. Blast dash costs shells, and because this, the more times you do it in the air, the less powerful your following Fullburst will be. You want it to be quick in one blast. Because this, if you are at a distance, consider using before the wirebug to get closer and then use the ZR version to do the last approach. If possible, you shouldn't ever blast dash straight into the monster, that is a death wish. Instead, a smart use is to flank the enemy. Use it when targeting others, or use the fast speed to get through the monster and slam its back. The fast slam is incredibly fast and safe. You can instant back hop upon landing. If you are fast enough, you can even cancel it before hitting the enemy. No use in that, obviously. The fast slam has the usual follow-up of a regular one, with the exception of the X input, where you will poke instead sweeping as usual. This poke is specially useful if you are using blast dash with a wide gunlance, because you can go instantly into the poke shell combo. Long types usually want to full burst, but using the poke motion can be good if you want to guard reload against an incoming attack. Normal is the best to full burst after an air slam because the bigger clip and less relative cost of blast dash. Full burst is as unsafe as always, but for sure blast dash makes it easy to initiate it. After full bursting, don't go into a sweep unless you are sure the monster can't retaliate or you don't give any FECK about being hit. What I used to do is to step into full reload. With evade extender you can back hop far enough to want to blast dash again. You will not find a faster way to do a full burst anywhere. The other high attitude move you can do is an ear shell with just A. Unless the monster is very flying or very tall, rapid air shelling is not worth it because an air slam does the same thing but faster and ground. There are zero advantages in using the slow landing slam version. Slower and does the same damage. And once again, you can't follow it with a poke. If you really want to sweep, there are 4 options. First, the simplest, fast and with good damage, is using the fast slam and then to quick reload into slam and then sweep. Then there is air shell. Slam into sweep. Makes you stay in the air for a while more, which is worse because you can't react if something goes wrong, but allows you to pull the sweep faster. A third unconventional method is forcing an air slam. When you try to do something forbidden in the air, you will get instead a regular air slam that can be followed by a sweep. There are several methods to do it. The most common ones are to try to shell while you are out of ammo, or if you try to do a third blast dash in the air. These two have the particularity that you keep the forward momentum of blast dash. This makes these worse because of how hard they are to nail down. Finally, you can do an air shell and then ZL plus X with 2 wirebugs for an air hail cutter. Behaves like the shell into slam version, but this has the perks of recharging your shells, reducing the cooldown of Wyvern Fire, and the hail cutter slam damage then is a lot higher than regular slams. I personally don't see using an air hail cutter for just sweeping. Air hail cutter is usually a terrible move, taking ages to use, but here combined with blast dash can be done in an instant. I even find myself doing it in the thin air to recharge Wyvern Fire. A great awesome combo of blast dash is using various air shells and then air hail cutter, recharging all your shells and setting you for a full burst and a Wyvern Fire. This is a premium punishing combo. The final thing I'm going to talk about is just the opposite, hail cutter into blast dash. You can do the blast dash as soon as after the air reload. This only use is to escape certain death in some situations. Imagine that you just used Wyvern Fire and the monster hasn't been flinched and is going to use an unguardable attack. You can hail cutter the recovery and get away from there. You also can use hail cutter into some air shells into blast dash to reach some high places. But there is not much more use. Finally, one thing I have not mentioned. The shell you use to initiate the blast dash does uncharged shell damage. And Wide doesn't get anything at all to compensate the loss of supercharged shells, and that only can hold 3 shells. Unlockable moves called switch skills in the game are more or less straightforward to get. Basically 2 of those are unlocked by just progressing the campaign, and the only one that is hidden is the blast dash. Blast dash can be unlocked as early as after the very first hunt in the game. You only need for it to craft and upgrade 8 different gunlance, and there is that amount of early game ones. This is the minimum amount of gunlances you have to craft or upgrade to get the unlock. Mainly bone series, insect series and ore series. Once you have it unlocked, my main recommendation is to use it to get used to moving around with it. Once you have it mastered, basically you can replace your palamute with yet another cat or using a cat in multiplayer. The Guild Cross armor is unlocked when you start the game and gives you the best defense you can get in low rank, but greatly lacks power and mobility. Once you reach the 3rd row of village quests, you can craft this armor that is much more useful and similar to what are you going to use later. About low rank weapons, the earliest and more powerful gunlances you can use are the Bone series. The very first can be unlocked by getting bones in the very first area of the game. Then can be upgraded with long shelling level 2 by fishing some fishes. The final gunlance upgrade for low rank is the Canyon Gunlance. You can upgrade it to level 3 before going to the quests to unlock the high rank quests. The Canyon Gunlance is so good that you can keep it upgrading it in high rank and use it until you unlock the endgame weapons. One important ramp-up skill of the Canyon Gunlance is Wyrmstake Boost that makes your Wyrmstake do the damage of the following level. This sadly do stop working at level 5, but until that, use that one. About high rank early armor, the best set is the following one that max your artillery and load shells while also giving you evade extender and lots of spare slots. Once you start crafting decorations and fight Bagelgoose, you can more to the endgame builds. This is all about early armor and weapons. I'm going to wrap up the beginners section with a small compilation of combat tips. Battle plan is an active one because how fixed damage works, there is one truth. The more you hit the monster, the most damage you deal. Attack skills will not boost your damage as much as with other weapons, and because of that, your main damage increase is staying on top of the monster as much as possible, stopping the offensive as little as possible. And getting hit is the worst DPS loss of the game. Gunlance works the best when you are familiar with the monster moveset. Knowing when an attack is coming up allows you to stop your offensive and use a guard edge to defend against it and continue with a slam into Fullburst into Wyrmstake. Because of this, when fighting an unknown monster, the key is observation. Instead, focusing on the higher commit moves. Go for the poke shell combo or charged shells, keeping your fingers ready to start a guard edge as soon the monster is initiating an attack. Guard edge has a long duration and you can still counter monster moves with a lot of start up. After unloading your stake, always do a full reload. Wyrmstake is your best source of damage, and there is no worse feeling than losing such big damage just because you weren't ready. If the monster moves away, consider instead of chasing it to stay your ground and wait the monster to come back to you. A typical error of newbie hunters is wasting too much time chasing monsters. The best place to fight a monster is on a corner or a corridor. That limits their movement and allows you to focus on attacking and dealing damage. If you are in a corner and the monster uses a charge attack, it will end close to you and you can attack its back. If you are in the middle of the map, he will go through you and get far to you, wasting your time. If you decide to chase it, initiating your offensive with a wire bug into an air slam is fast and powerful. Just be ready to guard edge the monster counter attack. And of course, whatever you get hit, get back into the fight with the recovery bug motion, ZL+B. With practice and knowledge, you can also find holes in the monster's attacks where you can place yourself, avoid the full attack and still be in position to attack. In these positions is the moment to use your full burst combo of slam, full burst, sweep, quick reload and repeat. Try to always land a Wyrmstake the moment the monster is going to recover from a trip. The delayed damage will count for the next flinch done. If you aren't sure how to avoid an attack, just guard, wait and observe. Learn the tell and the timing, and next time you will be able to guard edge that attack. After guarding an attack the normal way, you can get into a slam quickly doing the guard stab, upswing, slam. If you want to shell, your best option is doing one hop and shelling. Charged shell into Wyrmstake does as much damage as a Wyvern Fire, don't forget about this. And this is all for this total beginner guide to Gunlance. Shell types and switch skills. The level of customization of Gunlance in this game is insane. In past games you simply took one shell type and you were ready to kick rear without more complication. In this game it is much more complicated. We get 3 shell types and 3 groups of switch skills that give us a total of 24 combinations possible. But thanks goddess not every combination is good, and for each shell type we have only 2 or 3 ways to play that makes sense. In total there are 8 different playing styles. For making some sense, let me briefly explain first the shell styles and the different switch skills. The initial shell type is normal. Normal Gunlance offers the strongest burst fire attack at the cost of not being especially good at any other shell attack because the damage of every singular shell is the lowest of all. Besides being able to store 7 shells, each one of them gets stronger when being fired at once. The other weak point of normal shelling is the range of the shells being the most restrictive of all 3 types. Long types basically do everything normal does but better. Long has a big shell capacity of 5 shells with stronger individual shells. And Wyvern Fire is 33% stronger while Wyrmstake takes 2 extra ticks of damage. At the same time, Long, like its name indicates, has a lot more range that makes shells miss less. Before the last update this was compensated by virtue of normal Gunlances being better on the melee stats, but right now the Rampage Gunlance makes all 3 the same stat-wise. The longer reach in Fullburst makes it more reliable than normal and makes up for the lost damage. Normal still has its place if you focus a lot in aerial attacks including blast dash or if you are speedrunning, but otherwise Long is more versatile and easy to use. Use Long if you want to focus on doing Wyvern Fire, full bursting, Wyvern Fire and charged shells at once. Yay! Finally, there is Wide that is not comparable with the other 2. Wide offers 2 unique features. Charged shells can be extra charged, strong charged shell is the official term, and the Wyrmstake does blunt damage and can stun. The individual shells also are stronger than the rest, causing uncharged and charged shells to be the most powerful. This being said, ironically the highest damage you can get with a Wide type is still full bursting like the others do, but the difference is smaller and makes more sense to use pokes and shells or charging shells. The poke shell also is the best combo to apply status, and there are some Gunlances focused on poison that makes it worth crafting. In brief, the intended use of each shell type are: normal, full bursting on land or air; wide, poke shelling, charging shells or Wyrmstaking; long, a bit of everything; trade of all jacks, master of some. About switch skills, you get these 3 options. I will explain how to unlock the options in the progress part. Switch skill options. Hail Cutter or Ground Splitter. Hail Cutter itself is quite the worst switch skill in the game. Yes, in the game, not only Gunlance. Reduces the cooldown of Wyvern Fire as main use, and the slam attack is powerful but takes 2 wirebugs to use. The cooldown is considerable and Wyvern Fire is not too good with the latest updates favoring melee type combos. It is still fun to use when combined with other switch skills. I will explain it later. Ground Splitter on the other hand is universally great. Makes your shelling 20% stronger while it is active for 30 seconds. The attack also has super armor and you can combo it into slam or Wyrmstake so it can be used to attack. The only bad thing is that the wirebug cooldown is exactly the duration, so this virtually takes away one of your bugs. If you for whatever reason sheath your weapon, you will lose the bonus while being stuck with the cooldown, so is impractical when fighting monsters that requires you to use your wirebugs to jump or move around. Second type of switch skill is the hold shell action. You get charged shells or blast dash. I have already explained both to painful detail before in this video, so I'm not going to further elaborate. Next. The third type is the reloads, quick or guard. Quick is your standard monster hunter quick reload. Here reloads all the shells, unlike Gen in previous games, and has a novelty that you can cancel it by shelling, so you can reload and shell quicker. It also allows for doing slams just after it. Guard is the new kind of reload. Valor Gunlance in Generations Ultimate is similar but not the same at all. The animation and some characteristics are different. The main benefit of it is its name being a guard and reloading 2 for 1. The guard uses the regular rules of the one you do holding the right trigger. The second benefit is that it also reloads your stake as a full reload, so it is really a 3 for 1. Sadly, there are backdraws. First, it only reloads 3 shells regardless of your shell type. Then, you can't slam after the reload. At best you can upswing and then slam. Finally, this reload is a lot slower than the quick reload. There is a DPS loss of around 10% for poke shelling. This means that this reload is 100% incompatible with using the full burst move in normal and long types. This only gets good use if you focus on using poke shells or Wyrmstake Cannon, or both. Wyrmstake Cannon in particular, thanks to this reloads, gains an infinite combo of charged shell, fast Wyrmstake, reload and repeat that is the basis for various playing styles. These synergies and incompatibilities reduce the number of viable combinations. Furthermore, since the game has a big bias on using melee over shelling, the styles based on shells are weaker but still just as fun and totally viable in its use. I will talk about the strongest styles and builds later in this video. I also provide with this video a resume table with each one. You can see it in the description and the comments. Style 1 Slaplance. Long Wyrmstake Spam. Wyrmstaker is all based around the concept of abusing the charged shell into Wyrmstake combo as much as possible while defending yourself thanks to guard reload. This style is good with a fresh character after unlocking guard reload because it requires the least amount of skills to maximize. Nothing beats this in terms of all-around good damage and simplicity to build. The only damage skill you really need with this is artillery. Even load up is optional, although is highly recommended because with it you can find yourself out of shells at the wrong moments easily, speeds up recharge a tiny bit and allows you to use other attacks better occasionally like Fullburst. When not Wyrmstaking, the long's extra range is very useful to keep doing damage while you wait for your chance. Don't worry about wasting your shells because you only need one shell in the chamber to initiate the combo. I highly recommend rounding this play style with Wirebug Whisperer, good luck and guard. Wirebug Whisperer allows you to recover and use your guard edge and ground splitter more often. Guard reload is almost mandatory in this build because of the huge synergy with Wyrmstake. There is a huge window of time after performing a Wyrmstake where you can initiate the guard reload. After doing a WS, observe the monster and wait for its attack to guard reload. With enough points in guard you can absorb the attack and do a charged shell into Wyrmstake again. This style also can work with wide Gunlance, especially with Corn Popper, but wide Wyrmstake is considerably weaker and wide has a lot of potential in. Style 2. Stunlance. Wide Poke Shell and Wyrmstake. Wide Gunlance with the previous setup but with gameplay based around using pokes and shells in addition to the Wyrmstake. Compared with the Wyrmstaker, this style loses Wyrmstake damage but gains the WS stun and, most important, a stronger neutral game. Poke shells are strong and fast. You can dish a lot of damage quickly without risk. The trick to keep the damage up is mastering the timing of the poke shell. Hitting the shell button the very moment the poke comes out causes you to shell in that instant with zero delay. This makes all your pokes do shell damage for free. When you have not dominated the timing, I recommend you to double tap the shell button after every poke. If you hit the shell button too early, no shell will come out. Hitting the shell twice makes sure when trying to perfect frame the shell will come out for sure. This style has higher requirements of both player and armor skills. This only shines when you can have both artillery skills plus a couple of attack skills. Since you are doing a lot of quick attacks and wide spends double the sharpness per shell than normal and long, you also will need sharpness support skills. At the very least bring speed sharpening 3 with you since it is a level 1 skill and you can use your spare slots with it. Protective polish is better than razor sharp when using a Gunlance with blue or white sharpness. Blue and white sharpness are a bigger damage upgrade than anything but 100% affinity, and protective polish allows you to keep it for just 3 skill points. Razor sharp combines very well with guard edge to keep you sharp. Hey! Finally, use Wyrmstake whenever you see the chance to land it in the head. You can easily get up to 2 stuns per hunt. Using the Slugger skill will help you get the second one. But even with a Slugger, don't expect to stun the monster more than twice at best. Like with Wyrmstaker, your main means of defense is guard reload. You can help the timing for using it by throwing a charged shell instead of a single shell. You can release the button whenever you want and quickly go for guarding. If you find all this too complicated, you can dish the Wyrmstake and go for Style 3. Pokelance. Wide pure poke shell. When you forget about using a charged shell into Wyrmstake at all, you get liberated of charged shells. And guard reload and can go into using blast dash and quick reload. You can still use Wyrmstake after guard edging and using ground splitter. You should be able to stun a monster once per hunt. Since you lose guard reload, making smart use of your extended hops to blindside monsters and mastering guard edge are essential to make it work. Quick reload has a higher damage output than guard reload provided you don't waste too much time evading. Finally, the addition of Blast Dash allows you to get into melee range a lot faster. If you press X twice while flying, you will do a very fast air slam and follow it with an almost instant poke. You don't have to full burst after a slam from Blast Dash. Since you are doing even more attacks quickly, you need even more sharpness support than before. Evade window also meshes very well with this style. This style has the biggest synergy with the status weapons. Style 4. Slaplance. No shelling, only melee. This thing is back again, and Rise refusing to just die. There are circumstances where shelling is inadequate compared with using a gunlance like a greatsword that can't do any kind of charged attacks. In Rise in particular, there is a certain yellow monster that should be not named or talked about with a 90% hit zone when normally monsters have hit zones of up to 70%. This monster also makes it impossible to keep Ground Splitter active, since it needs platforming and that disactives Ground Splitter. This makes melee attacks 30% plus melee attacks stronger and shelling 20% less powerful, and shifts the power balance, making melee optimal. This style also will get stronger with the typical DLC power creep, where melee attack skills will be easier to get. Tigrex Gunlance with white sharpness and protective polish is a force to be reckoned with. Slaplance takes its name in what is based on using the Gunlance moves that loops like you are slapping monsters around. Upswing, slam, and sweep. Never focus on using pokes with this style, because poke shelling is way more powerful since you are adding shell damage, basically doubling the damage output. You also suffer of just 2 shells with this style. The switch skills that most synergy with melee only are Blast Dash, Hail Cutter, and Quick Reload. Blast Dash allows you to reach your opponent faster. Sadly, the slam can't be followed up by a sweep. The fastest way into melee combo is Blast Dash, slam, Quick Reload, and slam again. Hail Cutter and Ground Splitter are both kinda weak here. Hail Cutter is more useful here because you can use it from Blast Dash or to Blast Dash mid-air. Air Hail Cutter is the strongest melee movement of Gunlance with a very high motion value. The slam from Air Hail Cutter also can be followed up by sweep. Here, Hail Cutter has an advantage over Ground Splitter. Ground Splitter is good because of the super armor and can go into slam. But most of the time you should just use Guard Edge, that has a quicker recovery and doesn't make you take damage. Guard Reload only allows you to poke or upswing after using it and is slower than Quick Reload. Only use Guard Edge for defending or make good use of evasion skills. Because of its nature, the number 1 priority when using this style are melee and sharpness support skills. Evade Extender is as godlike as always. You may take points in artillery for making Wyrmstake finishers, but in general you will not have enough skills to spare. Finally, consider using Blast Dash into slam at point blank if you want to avoid attacks from bouncing. But why are you attacking bad hit zones with this? In general, you can steal the meta build for any other weapon, slap some Evade Extender there, and call it a day. Style 5. Burstlance. Normal full burst spam. Normal Gunlance conventional style. Also 100% long compatible. I would dare say it is even better in long. Traditionally you would hop or run to the enemy and then do a running lunge into slam and full burst. But things are different now. Why run when you can fly? Unless you are at a blank point, always initiate the combo with a Blast Dash. Blast Dash, then mid-air slam and full burst. This is quick, fast and effective. What you do next is where the skill is here. You may back hop, full reload and repeat. Go for a Wyrmstake if you have a clear aim to a weak point. Go for a sweep, quick reload and slam into full burst again for big sustained damage. All depend on how greedy you can get in your target. The most you full burst without moving the better. On general default into slam, full burst and back hop if you don't want to get hit in a silly way too often. This style requires a skill set very similar to the wide ones but with more emphasis in sharpness. In conclusion, full burst in Rise has a lot of emphasis in hit and run tactics with a lot of damage potential when the chance happens. Style 6. Wyvernlance. Wyvern Fire spam. A long shelling type exclusive version of Burstlance. You can in fact play as a Burstlance with this setup, but there is a perk here. Wyvern Fire in long does 4 hits instead of 3. 33% more power. The damage is close to Stake Lancing even with Ground Splitter. as long as you have 3 bugs with you. For making this style work you need 2 extra things, Wirebug Whisperer and Palico's Summon Endemic Life. The first makes the extra bug last for 27 more seconds, 1 minute 57 seconds, and the second is a Wirebug Dispenser. If you carry with you 2 Palicos you will always have an extra bug for sure. You totally need guard 3 or 5 to be able to Wyvern Fire through most attacks. The big concentrated Wyvern Fire damage and its pushback makes it safe to use in almost every single situation. This style of course has issues against monsters who use attacks that push you back even with guard 5. Also ground hail cutter sucks being slow and very use-safe. Most of the time you should be using the air version. The ground version is only good if you use it to replace a recharge or just after a Wyvern Fire since it can cut a good chunk of the recovery. I have experimented how even giving up ground splitter 20% damage can compare in damage because how massive is a Wyvern Fire attack that does 450 damage anywhere. Give it a try. Style 7. Freelance. Jack of all trades. Master of none. This is not really a style but a lack of style. There are those kinds of people who just want to do everything without restrictions. They want charged shells into WS, they want to slam full burst, they want to Wyvern Fire, they want to poke and shell, they want everything. They don't want top damage, they just want fun and freedom. The shell type that allows all this is Long. Long is good at full bursting. Long also has the strongest Wyrmstake and Wyvern Fire. The trade is that you have no blast dash and that for decent melee you need decent attack skills. This is the kind of build that will shine more with the expansions once you have more freedom to build. You also have to pick between Hail Cutter and Ground Splitter. Ground Splitter is no doubt the strongest option, 20% extra shelling damage is 20% extra shelling damage. But Hail Cutter will allow you to use Wyvern Fire more often being a truer jack of all trades, master of none style. Do yourself a favor and pick Wirebug Whisperer and use a Palico with Summon Endemic Life here. Style 8. Airlance. Normal Wirebug focused aerial style. The final style and the most experimental of all. For those who want to fly and use their Wirebug and blast dash to the max. This is made for normal because of the stronger air options and synergies with blast dash. Every kind of air attack is preceded by an air shell. Normal with the biggest clip is the one that loses less damage in the air. Since this is meant to use a lot of Wirebug to fly and move around, you are not keeping Ground Splitter active and Hail Cutter benefits more. The grounded version that only uses blast dash for air moves is the Fullburst one. This setup is also a lot like the Wyvern Lance style but is more focused in doing full bursts over Wyvern Fire. Wyvern Fire here is in fact pretty weaker than when you use Long. Use it as a guarding move more than a way of attacking. This style favors fighting quick monsters who don't stop in any place or require a lot of platforming. When you are in the ground close to the monster you function like a normal full burst style. The advantage of using Wirebugs instead of blast dash is you aren't expanding shells to move around and have a lot more control. You can also initiate at shell less. If you have 3 Wirebugs you can recharge mid-air with a Hail Cutter. To make this work, you need Quick Sheath and Wirebug Whisperer. Because this is harder to build than most other styles and the benefit is minor. This is why I have buried it as the last style. By the way, you can still ledge slam spam with blast dash. Another thing that refuses to die. Gunlance can benefit from a hella lots of skills. I would classify them in 3 classes. Shelling skills, tech skills and melee damage skills. The shell skills are those that improve directly or indirectly shelling damage and are the top picks in any build unless you are going into Slaplance. The quintessential skill is artillery. Boost shells a 30% and cut down the Wyvern Fire cooldown of 50%. No explanations needed. Pick this as soon as it is available. Load shells have 2 effects. Add 1 extra shell to your clip and also speed up reloads by 1 or 2 frames. You need both points for the extra capacity and is worth it for nearly any build. Focus in Rise only makes supercharged shells 2 frames faster. That is near useless since the only type that have supercharged shells is wide and usually you will be pressed for more skills. Inside the tech skills there are countless choices. so I'm going to focus on the most useful ones. The three kings of tech skills are Evade Extender, Wirebug Whisperer and Good Luck. Evade Extender makes your hops much longer while taking the same time to execute. Basically boost your moving speed without having to put your weapon away. The distance Evade Extender 3 takes you is ridiculous to the point that can actually take you away from the monster too much. Evade Extender 2 is perfectly fine and 1 is okay. Playing without Evade Extender is only justifiable if you use Blast Bash to move around, and still you will have difficulty evading some attacks or adjusting small distances. Without Wirebug Whisperer, your Silkbind actions take 20% more time to recharge. For example, Ground Splitter is reduced from 30 to 25 seconds. Gunlance lives and die depending of Guard Edge being available, and this raises its availability. This is also a must-have if you are using Hail Cutter, because you need 3 bugs to be able to use Hail Cutter and still have a free bug for Guard Edge. Also, you can chain 2 Hail Cutters after 8 seconds. The useful levels are 1 and 3. 1 is good enough just for the extra duration of the 3rd bug and has good synergy if you are playing with a Palico able to spawn more. Good Luck is just more rewards in each hunt. This means more chances to roll rare gems and more materials for the melder that is the endgame. Best thing of Good Luck is that you can add it easily to the shell-based builds after the previously listed skills. This somehow compensates a bit for the lower damage of shelling builds. The only bad news is that the decorations are hard to craft. Now, let's talk about the most commonly used tech skills. Guard usually takes no effort to include because Bagel Goose armor. The levels that matter are 1, 3 and 5, since these affect the knockback you get with monster attacks. Every attack has a hidden force value, and your shield plus the guard level decides how severe the pushback. Just 1 point in guard usually is enough to reduce the pushback of a good deal of attack. Some attacks will have severe push even with guard 5. If you get pushed with guard 5, you will get the shame push and chip damage with the other levels. Equally, if you don't get any pushback with a level 1, the other superior are wasted. Guard matters the most when using Guard Reload or Wyvern Fire styles, since guarding is part of your moveset. Guard Up is another freebie from Bagel Goose armor. I recommend to pick just 1 level at best. This is because that single level serves to make Guard Edge block unblockable attacks without any pushback or chip at all. Get used to Guard Edge them, because regular guarding of these attacks still hurts a lot. Diversion is good even when playing alone because it will make the monster less erratic because of your buddies. Flinch Free is a must-have when playing with longsword users. Defense Boost and Divine Blessing are okay if you have the spare slots. That is never. They are the most useful when used alongside Kushala Blessing 3 or a Gourmet Fish. Kushala Blessing 3 makes you regenerate your heal at a slow pace, and combined with the also health regenerating effect of a Gourmet Fish, you get a very good passive regeneration. With other damage resistant skills, it makes monsters damage you less, so your regeneration is more effective. Slugger can help you to get an extra stun with Wide Gunlance. It is a nice effect, but you will have a hard time including it in any build but Soulstorm, a special unique set. Finally, it is Fortitude. When activated twice, you get an extra 30% damage reduction and 20% extra damage. It is most useful when learning the game and when fighting against the optional endgame monsters that will cart you in for just 1 slot is very worth it. After covering the tech skills, let's talk about melee damage skills. I recommend only going crazy with these once you have one of the necessary charms to do a great build. Otherwise, while in poverty, focus on shelling and tech skills. The first and most important damage skill for Gunlance is not labeled as such. You will totally want 1 skill to handle sharpness, since both normal and wide spend a lot of it in short amounts of time. Blue sharpness is a 14% raw increase over green, and white is a 25% also over green. Let's sink this down. A green weapon with some handicraft turning it white will get the same effective raw as having 100% affinity without any condition like hitting a weak point. Note how I'm avoiding saying damage increases. This is because in Gunlance, unlike all the other weapons, its damage isn't directly increased with raw, because half of your attacks or even less will be shelling that is not modified by raw. The raw/shelling rating is not by any means fixed and depends on lots of factors, including the hit zones of the monster and how easy it is to keep Ground Splitter or your shell level. The current meta are the Rampage Gunlances, and all can be all shell types plus Tigrex or Barryote Gunlances for Slaplance. For the sake of simplicity, I use a ruling measure of reducing the raw increase to a 50% to get a measure. This comes from what in poke shelling half your attacks are pokes and half shells. Same with full bursting, a sweep plus slam can do similar to the 400 damage of a full burst. In reality, you will be hard pressed to find a scenario where your pokes do 70 damage each, but I like this just because you can calculate more easily than going for 40% or 45%. A 50% is just having the numbers, and this is a measure of the optimal conditions for melee. Since we are comparing raw with raw and both values are applied the same multiplier, there is no difference about which one will be best. This reduction only serves to expose that we may argue a lot about X being better than Y, but at the end of the day, the difference is a 1 or 2% and you could use either and finish your hunts in virtually the same time. By example here, white sharpness will only increase your total DPS by a 12.5%. And the opposite also applies. If your white weapon drops to green, you are missing a huge amount of damage. Even shelling damage will be diminished if drops to orange. Because of this, the most important raw skills in the game for Gunlance are Protective Polish or Razor Sharp. With 3 level 1 slots you can get Grinder 3 that goes very well with Protective Polish. The general rule is that the smaller your best sharpness is, the best Protective Polish becomes. With a Rampage Gunlance using Sharpness Type 1, you get 20 hits of white with Handicraft 1, and that requires Protective Polish to be realistic. Razor Sharp is better suited for long chunks of your best sharpness, or if you focus on shelling where anything yellow or better is good. For example, if you configure the Rampage Gunlance with Type 3 that includes a ridiculous long amount of blue. Razor Sharp's main advantage is the synergy with Guard Edge. If you guard edge often, you will never have to waste time sharpening your weapon. Wirebug Whisperer has a huge synergy here, since more frequent guard edge means more sharpness recovered that is slowed down by Razor. You are basically double the sharpness gain by guard edge. With Protective Polish, sooner or later you will have to grind your Gunlance. Seems worse, but when one normal full burst eats 7 hits of sharpness, it will drop your sharpness to green even with Razor Sharp. High sharpness enters in conflict with the Bludgeoner's skill. Bludgeoner only gives you a 5% DPS increase. I will apply the 50% discount to raw attack from now on, for 3 skill points. The only place where it makes sense to use is if your weapon has not have natural blue sharpens. After sharpness, the second biggest damage increase you will get is Weakness Exploit with a 6.25% damage increase in weapons with 0 starting affinity. That is almost always the case. Of course, this requires you to hit high value hit zones, but that is a big no requirement, because if you are doing melee, you are hitting these. I would also like to talk about Mind's Eye 30% extra attack being the opposite of Weakness Exploit. Most Apex and Elder Dragon only trigger Weakness Exploit in the head with a 50 hit zone. If you use Mind Eye in a 40 hit zone, then it gets bumped to a 52 hit zone. Basically can make hitting a leg better than hitting the head and makes hitting anything else better. Mind's Eye is a perfect match for Gunlance fixed damage. Attack boost 7 damage increase is relative to the weapon, but is always around the 7 to 8% DPS increase. Critical Eye 7 is only a 5% by itself. The cost of 7 skill points is deceitful because armor and charms always come with 2 or 3 points of these they are worth when you get them through armor or charms and utter trash as decorations. Don't waste your decorations here beyond the final 1 or 2 points that offer the biggest increase. For example, the Kaiser Helm comes with Critical Eye 3 and Critical Boost 1, that is maybe the best helm in the whole game. Critical Boost is a 6% when you have a 100% chance to critical hit. It is only a 3% at 50%. 90% affinity is a good point to stop investing skills at all. Gunlance has a low rate of attack. You more or less will do like 20 pokes in a minute. A 90% means that only 1 or 2 pokes will not crit. Assuming they do like 30 less damage each, is like 60 lost damage every minute. That is less than a shell damage. Even if you poke 30 times, the difference would be under 100 damage. And finally, there is Offensive Guard being a 7.5% but with an activation requirement. You only can trigger Offensive Guard in a meaningful way with Guard Reload and Guard Edge. You aren't getting that bonus all the time, and do nothing to Wyrmstake then is the common follow-up from a Guard Edge. So its effective DPS increase a little lower. The only raw attack skills are conditional skills are Agitator, Heroics, Latent Power, Maximum Might, Peak Performance and Counter Strike. It is hard to evaluate their usefulness in a vacuum. I have a certain fondness of Counter-Strike because of the easy activation and great power in low raw Gunlances. In a 170 Gunlance is a 7% DPS increase, and getting hit is not a big deal with enough defense and firewall. The duration is also extensive. All these would be nice to have, but unless you got a very good charm with these plus another good skill, forget about them. Of all status, poison is the most viable against a chunk of the monsters while you are using Camellia's armor that doubles the damage poison does. Finally, I should talk about stacking damage. Affinity increases are always additive. 50% from weakness exploit and 40% from crit IR 90%. Attack is also additive. And everything else is multiplicative with every other bonus. In general, you want multiplicative bonuses because they all improve each other, and the best your weapon is, the more damage they increase. For example, weakness exploit combined with offensive guard will give you almost a 14.2% DPS increase that is far better than the 11.25% that would be weakness exploit plus critical eye. Putting all this together, the damage priority goes. First priority should be always picked if possible. Green to white, 12.5% average damage increase. Cost 5 to 7 skill points. Green to blue, 7% average damage increase. Cost 4 to 6 skill points. Weakness exploit, 6.25% average damage increase. 3 skill points. Second priority, safe constant reliable damage if can be activated. Attack boost, 7 to 8% average damage increase. Costs 7 points. Critical eye, up to 5% average damage increase. Costs 7 points. Bludgeoner, 5% average damage increase. Costs 3 points. Incompatible with blue sharpness or better. Critical boost, from 3 to 6% average damage increase. Only pick it if you have close to 100% affinity. The high conditional skills. They have a great impact in combat if you can keep them in use. Offensive guard, 7.5% average damage increase. Cost 3. Counter strike, from 5 to 7% average damage increase. Cost 3. Mind's Eye, 15% average damage increase but only in 44 or less hit zones. Costs 3 points. Incompatible with weakness exploit. You are also giving up the highest damage possible using this. Peak performance, agitator, latent power, etc. damage increases from 5 to 9% but with annoying conditions to meet. Usually only taken when they are free in an armor or charm. With this in mind, your first 6 points in any build will be protective polish or razor sharp and weakness exploit or mind eye depending if the monster's hit zone are good or not. Then, you should see if you can add some handicraft to reach white or blue. If you are staying in green, add bludgeoner. And finally go for one of critical eye plus critical boost or offensive guard or counter strike. And I doubt you will have by now any more spare room for more damage without the additive effects watering it down. At that point, you are going to get more damage from Wirebug Whisperer, allowing you to guard edge into Wyrmstake more or guard removing the pushback of some attacks. Now that we know the skills worth having, let's see what actual armor pieces we can use. Unlike Monster Hunter World where builds are more or less fixed, in Rise your build is totally decided by your charm that is random. Best pieces to use will decide what skills you have. But besides Slaplance builds that use the general meta, the Gunlance ones are very conditioned to armor that include artillery and load shells. This causes almost every single build to use Bagel Goose armor pieces. Their effect is basically giving you either artillery, guard and load shells for free. The only part you are 100% ditching is the chest because guard up is good enough with a single point. The generalist piece to use instead is Vake chest because flexibility. The legs and the belt of Bagel armor are almost impossible to replace. You may replace them but in the exchange you will lose guard skills without anything to compensate for. If you aren't guarding much, the head can be replaced by some other options. The best one is the Kaiser Helm that gives you 3 points of critical eye and 1 point of critical boost and a level 2 skill point. It is a must-have piece of armor if you are combining melee and shells. With this helm and 3 levels of weakness exploit you already have a decent melee build with still lots of slots to spare. The arms also have some options if you don't require guard up. A highlight is Wyrmstake's arms that come with weakness exploit too. Watch out about the Wyrmstake's blessing since Dragon Blight causes you to lose damage from your shells since part of them are fire. Other than the classical template of Bagel plus Vake, you can get good use of the Camellia's blessing for poison builds and Kushala for super regeneration builds. I will talk about these in the next section about builds. The final armor to consider are the upgraded Ibushi and Narwa. Using the mix of Ibushi helm, chest and legs with Narwa arms and belt, you can get guard 5, focus 3, artillery 3, guard up 3, slugger 3, evade extender 3, part breaker 3, flinch free 3, and the native effect of the armor that grants some extra rewards. Bad news is that you need a very good charm to slot and load up in Wirebug Whisperer, but if you do it you will get a fun pure shelling build. About weapons, the current meta is pretty boring: Rampage Gunlance and either Tigrex or Bariote Gunlances for Slaplance. The Rampage Gunlances are all around superior for all shell types and can be customized to give you insane sharpness or status. Because other weapons can get the X-exploit ramp-up skills, they may be optimal against some monsters, like Cornpopper against aquatic monsters gets a 10% extra shell and melee damage. But in general a Rampage Gunlance will do near the same work without having to do specialized builds. Between Tigrex and Bariote Gunlances there is some arguing about which is better, with good arguments for both. I value Bariote better because of the insane affinity. They are close enough to be equivalent. Before you can craft the final Rampage upgrade, the existing level 5 Gunlances of Rathian, Ronka, Hollister, Almudron and Cornpopper will work for you, but all those will get obsolete. Next point is to talk about optimizing the Rampage Gunlance. Unlike other weapons where they get extra ramp slots for basic characteristics, Gunlance must pay for getting a usable shell level and type. The good news is that this makes the job of finding what works best way easier. Another simple pick is the second slot. You only have to decide if you want to use status or elements or go for raw. If you are using a normal or long Gunlance where you spend most your time full bursting, picking raw is a no choice. Status and elements are incompatible with the very slow full burst combo. It is not worth the hefty price of 30 raw to pay, especially if you are using a high affinity build, since elements or status can't do critical hits. We have trimmed down the decision to only one ramp slot, the first one. This one is wild with no less than 5 different viable options. Attack boost with plus 10 raw. Affinity boost with plus 10% affinity. Sharpness type 1 with a little blue but no raw penalization. Sharpness type 3 with a huge amount of blue but minus 10 raw. Sharpness type 4 with a little white and a pixel of blue for minus 20 raw. The effectiveness of these ramp-ups depends on the set you are using. For this comparison I'm using the following set as a template. This is plus 70% affinity with critical boost 3. There is an optional slot used for evade extender that I will replace with handicraft for those that can reach white. You may push higher damage, but seriously, it is not worth it. You also can get even more damage if you had a better charm than this weakness exploit 2 with one level 2 slot, but I'm being realistic here. I'm also adding to the raw values the expected buffs you are going to have while hunting. I expect everyone to have a power talon and charm for 15 extra raw, to eat for booster and drink 1 dema drug. This translates to plus 30 extra raw that changes stuff around. With these parameters, I'm going to go for the worst damage to the best. I'm already seeing you skipping to the end, but I would take a peek because sometimes, less damage has advantages. Anyways, let's begin. Sharpness type 3. This kind of sharpness gives you a huge chunk of blue at the cost of less raw. This gives us 390 slam plus full burst damage in a 60% hit zone and 537 adding a sweep. For reference, this is 4 and 10 points less than Eric Nallance, with this having the advantage of all the combinations of being the one with the easiest to handle sharpness. This huge sharpness allows you to use razor sharp instead of protective polish and will last a huge amount of time, especially if you guard edge frequently. This is also good if you don't have room in your build for handling bits of sharpness. Sharpness type 4. Natural white sharpness at a cost of minus 20 raw. This is the most eye-catching of all types, but is a trap because the raw penalization totally negates the benefit of the 10% extra damage from the white affinity. This is still a net gain over the Type 3 with 6 and 14 extra damage. Of course, I repeat that this has the huddle of a small amount of white to handle, so you may consider going for the Type 3. But anyways, this is an avoid because it offers no advantages over the better ones. Affinity. This one keeps the original blue sharpness and gives you 2 and 5 extra damage over the Type 4 sharpness. You can't get white sharpness with this one and the amount of blue is small. The only advantage of this ramp up over the rest is that it greatly reduces the variation, having a higher affinity % of 80. Raw. Just 30 points more raw than using white sharpness. This translates to 1 and 2 points more than the higher affinity. It is a virtual tie. The biggest factor of this versus affinity is the variation. This is better if you high roll since the critical hits do more damage. But if you low roll, you will do less. In the end, the average will even out, and I doubt either way will be a considerable change in your clear times. Where there is a difference is in the last one. With 5 and 11 points of difference with the extra raw, we get the sharpness Type 1. This one is special because it has a trick. It can reach white sharpness with 100 decoration. This is like using Type 4 but exchanging one slot for plus 20 raw. The 10 less raw than using the extra raw is negligible because both already have high raw. This, of course, falls behind if it drops to blue or green and you need to keep it up all the time. This build only allows for protective polish too and can be tricky. To adjust the calculations, I have removed 1 point of critical eye to compensate for the slot used for handicraft. With this, we have determined the best ramp-up combination for the weapon, but we have yet one thing left. Normal or long? The difference of both is basically the difference between the Fullburst since they are exactly the same melee. In update 1.0 I said one statement about how long ends being the equal of normal damage-wise because the Fullburst difference is offset by the strongest everything else of long. Long has 33% stronger Wyvern Fire, stronger Wyrmstake and stronger uncharged shells, all tied with a longer range that makes it harder to miss shells. Wyrmstake spam is no longer a viable strategy but still is a good follow-up if you guard edge an attack or if you get a clear shot to a weak point. The advantage of normal Fullburst is when using Blast Dash, you only lose 40 points of damage while long loses around 50. In the end, both have pros and cons and it is a matter of personal taste or objectives. If you are a speedrunner, no doubt you should use normal because it offers the highest damage. But long is more consistent and has the huge advantage of the range. In the big picture, the difference between a Fullburst with sweep between both is a 1.8%. Seriously, unless damage is the only thing that matters to you, use this Gunlance with long type. And that is all for the... A final note about the Rampage Gunlance is that the layered armor you use matters. Longer Gunlances have Wyrmstake while shorter ones have less. Yes, it doesn't make any sense. Longest Wyrmstake is Kushala Dewara layered weapon. Finally, I have prepared some builds using the charms and decorations I got access to. Remember that every single build is subject to customization for your preferences. First build is for wide Gunlances using poison thanks to Camellia's armor power. It is used for poke shelling, don't caring about hit zones and letting both shell damage and poison do its work. Poison is effective against a lot of monsters in this game and no amount of buffing pokes damage comes close to it. Second build is for maximizing melee damage, and is not really optimal because that would require an attack boost 3 charm that I'm lacking. An observation is about Kaiser arms. They are there so I could spare myself to craft a critical boost decoration. If evade extender 1 is not good enough for you, you can downgrade critical boost to 1. I would rather use protective polish 3. Third build is the mentioned Storm Soul build. Storm Soul is a power only unlocked after beating a DLC monster and has the power of making every armor skill gain a couple points and some side effects. I got a very good charm and thanks to it I can have both Wirebug Whisperer 3 and load shells added to it. When I'm playing wide pure shelling, this is the set to use. Finally, there is the Zombie Gunlance build with max defense and regeneration. You can use this build to survive the optional ultra hard apex monsters and get your health back. This build also trivializes any earlier monster when fully upgraded. The weak point of the build is the lack of evade extender. You can still slot it by replacing protective polish. In that case, use a Rampage Gunlance with type 3 shelling. Note that I'm lacking here using a regular shelling build with bagel goose pieces and vake. This is because for pure shelling you can get some unique things with both the zombie and the storm soul sets you can't with a regular one. I would still use a regular set using 3 good luck decorations, but other than that, having this kind of regeneration is priceless. And this is a wrap up. I wanted to talk about everything regarding Rise's Gunlance, and I think I have done it. If I'm still missing something, let me know in the comments.
Sentence had too many syllables. Apologize!